Hey everyone, it's Nurse Dani coming to you live with Dr. Alden from Altaview Family Medicine. And she's been with us before. We were talking about flu shots, and today we're talking about screen time, which is very pertinent because it's summer and kids have lots of time. Some parents too. So I think it's a very relevant topic. First of all, introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me back.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, I think it was 6 months ago, 7 months ago when I was here. So I'm Dr. Alden. I practice at Altaview, which is down in Sandy. Been in practice for about 9-10 months, and we're really enjoying it. Just moved here from Los Angeles, and we're enjoying the outdoors and camping and just kind of beautiful state of Utah. So
it is beautiful.
Yeah.
Get out and do those things instead of burying yourself in screens, right?
Exactly.
What we're going to talk about today.
There you go. Good segue.
So while we're talking today, feel free to ask questions. We may get some time at the end to answer a few of those. But you're very passionate about screen time. What got you so interested in it?
Yeah, so it kind of started in med school. I did a bunch of kind of after-school programs for peds and adolescents. So it was mostly for like underserved, low-income adolescents that we kind of told them, okay, we got to get up, get out and play. It was about promoting physical exercise and also decreasing screen time. And we would do these little sessions to kind of educate them. And I don't know, just doing that kind of showed me what a small difference it can really make, or what a small thing can really make a huge difference. So like 30 minutes of just exercise, these kids were excited to do it again. And they were, putting their screens away or not always wanting to do their video games. And we kind of track them over the course, and their weight improved, their moods improved. So that kind of sparked it. And then I became a parent myself. So that's when I was like,
that's a game changer, isn't it? It's so convenient to just hand your child a screen, especially like, we both work in clinics, and I would see, my patients all the time. It's like, okay, you have to sit here for an hour, watch a show. And I think that's totally appropriate. We're going to talk about that today. Like there's times when it's okay to do that, but it's more about the overall picture, not necessarily about like the set amount of time they have per day. Talk more about that.
Yeah. So, when my husband and I had our kids, we kind of realized like, oh, we'll get to that stage when we get to it. And it totally sneaks up on you way before you expect it.
When they're just so little, they want to grab it and watch it,
exactly.
right?
Like he was 6, 9 months old. They can text
better than me at 2 years
Yeah,
age.
It was so funny. One of our friends' kids went up to the big screen TV and tried to swipe it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like
That's the world we live in.
This is the world we live in. So I think my husband and I realized sooner that, okay, we need to kind of sit down, have a discussion about it, figure out what rules we want to, implement at home. And also, we had such different viewpoints in the beginning, too. We both came from single-parent homes, and we were watching TV all the time. That was like our babysitter, right? But my husband was more into video games, and I was kind of more, into TV shows and movies. But I kind of have this viewpoint of like, oh, screens are bad. Let's get them to do other stuff. Whereas my husband's like, video games, like good hand-eye coordination. Like that's positive.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, especially from guys.
Yeah. So we've definitely had to kind of meet in the middle and figure out like what's healthy, what's not healthy. So
setting boundaries and sticking to it with your kids.
Yeah.
What kind of boundaries are good to set, and based on what evidence is out there to help parents when they're making these guidelines?
Yeah. So maybe before I talk about the recommendations, I can kind of talk about the negative effects of screen time.
Absolutely. Like, why is it important? And I think it's good to explain it to your kids too, so they understand the why.
It's not just you put this
Mom
away, like this is what it
TV,
is.
No more screens. Yeah.
It's just going to make them act out. So why is it so important? I mean, obviously media is everywhere. It's in schools, it's in our workplace. Even if you don't have screens at home, friends' houses have screens. Your kids are not really going to be able to avoid it. I saw a statistic that kind of was slightly alarming. 1 in 3 internet users are people under the age of 18. So, I mean, that's a huge amount, and that's not even proportional to the population. So our kids are on all the time, and so we need to kind of figure out a way to figure out what's the positive, what's the negative, see what research is out there, and kind of figure out guidelines to steer our kids so that the newer generation kind of knows how to handle it, so that we're not just letting media kind of influence us.
Yeah, because if we don't teach them, media will.
Right, exactly. So that's the key. Basically, when I discuss with parents, I just say, you know, you are the parent. You can kind of allow media and screen time to be part of your kids' everyday activities, but it's more about the well-roundedness.
What's happening around the entire picture.
Right, yeah. So as far as the harmful effects, though, we kind of talked about that a little bit. A way I like to look at it is, what is it replacing? So is it taking away from their sleep? Is it taking away from physical exercise or homework or just one-on-one interaction?
Social interactions with friends, parents, people.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's so different than just watching a screen and having, you know, moving objects that have really not a lot of relation to just real life 3D, you know, human interaction.
I saw a news story a little while ago that just like really struck a chord in my heart. There was a second grader participating in a science fair, and their project was inventing something to block their mom's cell phone signal so their mom would spend more time with them. If that's so not a wake-up call to that parent and the rest of us to do some self-reflection and to, you know, really think about how much time we're spending on our phones. Man, what else do you need?
Right. And it kind of goes to like, they follow our example, right?
Yes.
So whatever we do, they're also going to see, okay, well, this is appropriate and this is fine. So there's been a lot of research showing the amount of screen time that parents use definitely directly correlates to what kids are using. And that kind of directly influences them. So
nothing makes me more sad than like seeing a whole family sitting around a dinner table and while everyone's on their phones, right?
I know. You go to a restaurant and you just see kind
everyone. I've gone to family functions before and everyone's on their phone and I'm like, guys, for once we're all together, let's do something together.
Let's actually talk, right? Instead of writing a comment on Facebook to each other.
Or snapping a picture and then you have to tell everyone about what you're doing, but you're not really doing anything.
Right. And there's also, you know, and these are kind of sad stories too, of parents doing things on their phone without realizing that their kids are off doing something else. You know, it's like we're really neglecting parenting duty sometimes when we're so attached to our technology.
So this is good for information for us and for them. So back to like, make sure you're not replacing screen time with sleep, exercise. What other harmful effects can screen time have?
Yeah, so going back to kind of those, the evidence shows that for sleep, because of the screens kind of emitting that blue light, it really tells your body to kind of not go to sleep. So I would really advise at least 1 hour before bedtime, no screens if you can, for yourself and for kids, because it really does affect it. And they've done a lot of research. And this is particularly important for teens. Teens, as you know, or maybe, you know, us being teenagers, you want to stay up later, you wake up a little bit later, our sleep cycle's a little bit off. And also it's a very, you know, going through puberty, emotional time. That's kind of when sleep is so crucial for physical and emotional and mental health. So that kind of leads to my next thing is mental health. They've definitely done a lot of research showing that increasing use of screen time or social media does have a correlation to increased anxiety and depression. So actual diagnoses.
Makes perfect sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's sad because there's a lot of positives with social media and they connect well, but I think it's when it replaces the real life experiences that our teenagers are starting to feel like, oh, you know, I'm not good enough. I'm not like so-and-so.
It's easier for them to compare themselves. They have so many other opportunities to compare themselves to other people more than you and I did when we were teenagers.
Totally.
And there's more opportunities for them to be bullied. And people may say things on social media that they wouldn't have said to someone face to face. And so you made a suggestion before we started of just having like a centralized location in your home where you bring phones to every night. It's like a charging station and they stay there from from this time at night till this time in the morning.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
I really like it too. And it's a good thing for like us as adults too.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband is always, on his phone right before bed, and we have our chargers right, by our nightstands. And it's a little bit different. Sometimes I'm on call, or sometimes you have a work email, or you have to have something right next to you. But still, I think it's a good rule to just have the phones or tablets or whatever kind of out of the bedroom as much as possible, especially for our kids and our teenagers that are constantly on there and finding things and, bullying. And that goes the other thing, or my next kind of recommendation is look at your kid's phone and tablet. Make sure you know kind of what they're exposed to, text messages, what people are kind of commenting. I know it's tough because you want to give them a little privacy, but at the same time, you do need to monitor what your kids are exposed to.
We were talking before about how rates of suicide have gone up, and that has been directly correlated to increased screen time as well. Talk about that.
Yeah. So especially in Utah, actually, it's gone up in the last 15 years about 45%, which is huge. I think we're the 5th highest in the nation. Which is really sad. This is just all suicide, but definitely teen suicide is on the rise too. And they've shown a direct link with social media use. So anxiety, depression does go up. Also, suicidality. So just thinking about suicide. Girls usually have more suicide attempts, but not as successful. Boys usually are a little bit more successful, so their rates are a little bit higher. So those kind of things, they've actually shown that hours on social media can be a strong contributor.
If this isn't enough to reevaluate your family today, I don't know what else could drive a family to do it.
Right. I mean, it's about keeping your kids safe, keeping them healthy, and the best way to start is now when they're either young, even if they're a little bit older, it's never too late to kind of just have a discussion with them about it. So I usually tell parents, sit your kids down, discuss with them what they are watching, explain, maybe advertisements, what they do, explain maybe violent video games, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Try to select content that's, more educational, more helpful, more positive, and just use your best judgment. There's not really a super clear-cut rule like, oh, this show is bad and this video game is good or whatever, but just use your best judgment.
I'm pretty sure that what got myself and my daughter through my bachelor's degree of nursing was Sesame Street.
Yes, I love Sesame Street.
She was a year and a half when I decided to go back to school, and I'd spend like 4 or 5 hours a day studying, and I'm like, how do I do this with an 18-month-old? Yeah. And I'm like, okay, maybe she's learning something from Sesame Street while I'm learning something from my pathophysiologist.
Right, and they've actually done studies on like PBS programs, and it shows positive, actually, like retaining information, letters, numbers, and also emotions are huge. They teach that. A lot of my friends love Daniel the Tiger. Have you heard that show? I mean, these parents are like, oh my gosh, I'm learning things from Daniel the Tiger. And I'm like, well, yeah, because we just didn't really get as much of that. So finding good, positive, educational programs for your kids to watch. And obviously that's kind of for younger aged, but even the older kids, there are shows that can benefit. I think one on Netflix was called Who Was or something like that. Have you heard of that show? It's just about historical figures and kind of history, but in a fun kind of way. And it's a little bit more for preteens and stuff. So there's lots of good programs out there. And I'm not trying to endorse one or the other, but
just think twice about what they're watching, and when they are spending time in front of a screen, what they're doing with it.
Yeah. And I tell parents to just maybe watch it, give a quick run through before you turn it on for your kids. Yeah,
take it for a trial run. Don't just let them experience it and then walk in and be like, what are you guys watching? Turn it off. Or
oh, whoops, I didn't realize that was in there. So, yeah.
Another piece, we kind of touched on this, but you gave me an article before we met today about studies that have been done on this topic. And something that really stood out to me was that children are less able to self-regulate when they use screens as a coping mechanism. Talk more about that.
Yeah, so they've actually shown, especially age 0 to 5, that's such a crucial time of development, that they've shown a direct correlation with how much screen time they use and how well they develop those skills of time management, coping, emotions, visual cues, and social cues. So the self-regulating, it's really tough because kids don't have that skill developed. I mean, you really don't get that until in your 20s, really.
By that we mean like you're able to control your emotions and find ways to work through the emotions you're feeling.
Exactly. Actually understand your emotions, self-regulate, make sure that you're able to kind of control it, right?
Because kids now, if they start crying, what do a lot of parents do? And I've been guilty of this too. Here's a phone, especially if you're in public.
Oh, well, I know that's kind of a different story. It's tough when they're throwing a tantrum, and it's so easy to do that. And I would just say, try not to have the screen time be a reward or kind of a coping mechanism, just because it really hardwires into your children like, oh, I don't know how to cope except if I have an iPad. Yeah. So that's kind of a dangerous thing. What would be maybe more appropriate, takes a little bit more time, is pulling them aside, talking to them. What are you feeling right now? What's going on? Do you need some alone time? You know, pulling them aside a little bit and having the screen time not be associated with it.
You know, I know there's days when my son or my daughter they've been like watching an unusual amount of TV or been on, you know, a phone for an unusual amount of time because whatever was going on. And they're totally grumpy at the end of the day. Like every parent's had one of those days, right? And then I'm like, well, it's probably because they've been on the phone for so long or been sitting in front of the TV. And it's harder to get them to stop. It's like they're addicted and, you know, they got bloodshot eyes and they're like, ah. Whereas if they just have it for like a half hour or something, you know, when we're all like, we've done all of our things for the day, we've interacted, I've crossed all those things off, like you were saying, we've exercised, we've played together, we've talked, we've had dinner together. Okay, we can all kind of sit down and have some decompression time. It's easier to get the screen away from them when it's been a shorter amount of time.
Totally.
So, like when can you paint a picture of like a well-rounded family-child experience and then like what some warning signs might be so parents can recognize that if this is a problem and they need to address it? Yeah.
So the main thing is sleep, making sure that they're getting at least, and it depends on age too, but the appropriate amount of sleep for their age, making sure that you're putting the priority of physical activity, so at least that before you give them screens, making sure that they're getting their homework done, education, not lacking on their duties. I wrote down a couple other ones. So going on walks, running errands. Sometimes you can kind of take your kids out with you, have them help bring some groceries in, you know, things that are a little bit physical and also social too. They're learning kind of how to interact with you. Give them tasks around the home and tell them how valuable their help is. These kind of things, making sure that you're getting little pieces every day. And then maybe the screen time can be, like you're saying, a half hour where everyone's kind of decompressing and we're like, okay, we've done enough. Now it's kind of our alone time and downtime. So that's kind of the picture that I paint. Doesn't have to be a set number of minutes or set number of hours.
Yeah, I think every parent wants to know, is there like a certain specific number of hours that I should limit my kids to?
It's like, oh, after 2 hours, 2 hours and minutes, oh, we're done. Yeah, no, that's definitely not the case. I mean, I do... Basically, when I have well child checks, I go through and there's always the questionnaire saying, how many hours are your kids on the screen? And the old guidelines used to say like, 2 hours for kind of school-age kids. If they're a little bit younger, less than 1 hour. Now they've kind of a little bit steered away from the exact numbers just because it's more about the whole picture.
Yeah.
When you're spending 2 hours in a day after school on screen time, what are you neglecting? Because you really only have so many hours in a day. So are you just eating dinner, going straight to the screens, and then going to bed? We don't want that. So if 2 hours is, you know, the amount that the amount of time that you use, but you're still getting all those other things done, maybe it's okay. But you mentioned kind of what are some warning signs. So I found this kind of online, and it definitely was an eye-opener for me, because I was like, okay, maybe I need to kind of
I'm sure
change
every
things.
parent has seen this. And maybe even, sometimes you can even recognize these things in yourself.
Right, definitely. So the guidelines actually said, if these sentences ring true, it may indicate that screen time is becoming a problem for your child or for yourself. So one is, it's hard for my child to stop using screen media. That seems like it happens all the time. But like you were saying, the longer it goes, the harder it is for them to kind of shut it off. When my child has a bad day, screen media seems to be the only thing that helps him or her feel better.
Back to what we were saying about like emotional connections and ability to self-regulate.
Yeah, and the coping mechanisms. My child's screen media causes problems for the family. That's when we're getting to, okay, this is not healthy. I kind of related it like the screen is kind of a member of the family almost, and is kind of causing a rift between kids and parents. So if that starts to become the case, it's time to reevaluate for sure. Let's see. Oh, my child sneaks using screen media. Yeah, that's another warning sign. If you find your kid kind of, hiding and doing some video games, or sneaking a phone, sneaking a tablet, trying to log in, that's kind of a warning sign that, okay, things are getting a little bit out of hand, time to kind of scale it back and talk to them about it. Parental controls are huge too. If they're able to sneak into the phone or the tablet, depending on like, okay, do you have a passcode? Do you have some way to kind of lock it? Kids are pretty smart.
They are.
They can work around it sometimes.
They are really smart. I remember we were all joking around one day. Our kids wanted our passwords, and we were like, absolutely not.
Right.
So they sat there and they tried to guess. And there was a couple of times they got close. They never really got it, but
right.
They were on the right track. If they sat there long enough,
I know.
They may have figured it out. I think it is really important to not give them your passcode.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a lot about setting those boundaries, because kids do not have kind of the development.
About it.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't have that capacity to set rules, set boundaries. That's why you're the parent, right? You set those rules and you're consistent about it. You can't one day say, okay, go free and play 4 hours, and then the next day be like, okay, you did too much, now it's 0. So just having kind of a consistent thing, like what are the daily tasks that they have to do before they can have their screen time, or maybe they earn it. Or
that's kind of something we did for a little while. We got like some pirate coins, and we're like, okay, so you start the day with 4 of these, and they're each worth 15 minutes. This was like during school too, so it was like, limited time.
Right.
And so they could like hand it to me and cash it in for 15 minutes at a time, or they could like hand me all 4 and do an hour. But then after a couple days, they were like, we realized this backfired, so we stopped, because then they would want to stockpile all of them, and then so they'd do nothing, kind of like you were saying, for like 3 days, but then they'd want 3 hours on the next day.
Maybe you like take all the coins
so, like,
at the end of the day.
At the end of the day. Yeah.
Right. There's fine print that comes with this. Okay. Yeah. So it's just figuring out a system. And like I said, there's a lot of like trial and error, like, us as parents, we're not perfect. And so you might have to try a few different methods until you find one that works for your family. And so there's not kind of one set way to do it, but there are some suggestions, ones that we kind of talked about, like the central charging station, talking to your kids about it, maybe having them do other things or tasks lists before they're able to do their screen time. Just some good suggestions, and see how it works.
I love that. Yeah. Those are all great suggestions. Just helping us all be more aware, parents and children alike, of how our screens are affecting us.
Oh my gosh, I know. And my husband had actually set this rule, and we did it maybe for a couple of weeks. We couldn't really do it for a while, but we decided no phones kind of in the bedroom, and we got so much better sleep. And we were able to talk and have discussions. And if our kids kind of run into the bedroom, they don't see us just constantly on our phone. We're there. We're kind of a little bit more receptive to talk to them or tuck them in or whatever. So there's always rooms for improvement. So we definitely slipped back, and now we're kind of back on our phones again. But it's a continual process to kind of be aware. Don't just be passive and let it kind of overtake your family's life.
Great suggestion, because it can if we don't watch it.
Yeah, totally.
Anything else that you would tell parents about it?
Let me see if I've kind of missed anything. We kind of touched on obesity a little bit. So childhood obesity is just becoming such a rampant problem. We're diagnosing kids with diabetes when they're 8, 9, which a couple, 20 years ago, it wasn't something that we would diagnose until maybe teenage years. So it's just becoming more and more prevalent, and it's just being aware when you go to your doctor's appointments with your kids, check their weight, check their height, make sure you know what their BMI is so that you can kind of start to see, all right, are we getting to a point where I need to reevaluate? Why are they not getting as much physical activity? Now that it's the summer, it's great weather, going out swimming, get your kids out of the house, try to get them to do stuff or go to the park together, so that they don't have to rely on screen time, because kids are always like, I'm bored. Yes. What can I do? Try to come up with some other activities that they can do.
We have a boredom list. So if the kids say they're bored, we pull it out. And there's some suggestions, maybe things that they haven't thought of.
Right.
That they could do. And if they don't like any of the fun activities, I also have a list of chores.
Ooh.
So we just I'm bored is like a swear word in our house.
Oh, I like that. My grandma used to say, well, if you're bored, then you're a boring person. And I was like, okay. So, maybe that was a little harsh, but yeah, there's definitely ways around it so that you don't have to just instinctively give them
go to screen time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So something that I think that we didn't hit on as much, but yeah, I think that was kind of all I wanted to cover.
Okay, well, such good information. It's caused me to do some self-reflection for myself, my family. I hope that it's been beneficial for all of you out there too. Thank you so much, Dr. Alden, for being with us today and for sharing this wealth of information. This could be life-changing for people.
It's just a constant reminder. It's something that we can all work on, and we can all just be aware, and little reminders kind of, even if you just change one little thing, it'll kind of go a long way.
Right.
Yeah.
So where can people find you again? Tell everyone where you practice.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if everyone should find me all at once. No, I'm just kidding. I know. So I work at Altiview Clinic. It's family medicine, and it's me and a few of my colleagues. We just started a new practice there. And there's a great pediatrics group on the 3rd floor above us, and then internal medicine on the 4th floor. So we're all primary care, and we encourage people to kind of find a primary care doctor, make sure that you get your kids their annual physicals, or maybe more frequent if they're younger, and get kind of your routine screenings. And we go through screen time, talk about all of these things, especially with kids. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for being with us. No problem. Of course, if you guys have questions for me, you know where to find me on Facebook. Have a great day, everyone.